My sister leaned back on the leather chaise like she'd owned the place for decades, feet up, shoes on the imported marble, while her husband barked orders at my parents like unpaid servants. "This is my house, get out," he screamed. Mom was shaking so hard her teacup rattled in her hand. Dad's throat worked like he was swallowing glass. And then I stepped into the foyer and closed the door behind me. "My name is Harper Lane, I'm 31. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned. Why do the ones who give the least demand the most?" The $425,000 mansion was my gift, my money, my paperwork, for their 55th anniversary. The ribbon I tied on the deed still sat on the dining table. I bought it because I wanted one simple thing, to see my parents rest. Relax. Finally, for once, not worry about anything. But what did my sister do? She arrived at 9 a.m. with her SUV full of temporary bags, then immediately began acting like Queen of Versailles, moving furniture, bossing everyone, rearranging my parents' bedroom like it was a spare Airbnb she'd upgrade. Her husband strutted around like a landlord, telling Dad to keep noise low, telling Mom those curtains are tacky, telling the movers to dump my gift furniture in the garage because we'll bring our own later. When I walked in, all conversation evaporated. Silence. Because they realized the problem wasn't that my parents didn't have boundaries. The problem was, I hadn't arrived yet. My sister smirked, trying to recover. "Oh look, the banker arrives." Not daughter. Not family. Banker.
ATM. Sponsor.
Walking wallet. I set my keys down on the marble counter and smiled softly. "Good. Let's talk accounts then." My sister's husband, Travis, chuckled like an amateur villain in a cheap movie. "Oh please," he scoffed. "Don't start your usual money monologues. We already handled things." Handled? That one word made Dad flinch. Mom squeezed her trembling hands together like she was trying to hold her bones inside her skin. I walked further in, slow, controlled, not raising my voice, not rushing. There is a special type of silence that comes right before the storm, where everyone knows something irreversible is about to happen. That was this moment. Travis leaned in smugly. "We're signing the renovation contract tomorrow. The designer said this place needs a luxury tone. Our tone, you know, something more high status than your cheap taste." Dad exhaled like someone punched him. Mom finally whispered, voice tiny, "They threw our clothes into the guest room, like we're visitors in our own home." My jaw tightened, but I didn't break. Instead, I turned to my sister. "Tell me exactly what you think you own here," I said quietly. She crossed her arms. "This house. Obviously." I smiled. Slow. Deadly calm. "Interesting," I said. "Because it's actually titled to Mom and Dad only. Fully. Legally. Paid in full. Not a single signature belongs to you or your in-laws." Her face flickered. Travis scoffed again, defensive now. "Please. Your parents said it was our anniversary gift too. We're the future of this family." My sister nodded quickly, desperate. "Right. We're the ones who will take care of them when they're old." I laughed. One short breath. "You can't even take care of your own laundry." Mom gasped softly. Dad looked at me like he suddenly remembered who I really was. I dropped my purse on the countertop. Time to redistribute power correctly. I walked toward the dining table, toward the deed, the very document they apparently never bothered to actually read, just assumed they could claim like everything else they leech off. My sister's voice cracked first. "What are you doing?" I didn't look up. "Correcting the narrative." Travis stepped forward, chest puffed like he thought intimidation worked on me. "It doesn't matter whose name is on paper. Your parents are old. We will take over eventually." I slowly turned, eyes locked on him. "Oh, you still think this is inheritance," I said softly. He blinked. Then I placed my hand on the deed ribbon and ripped it off. "It's not." Mom covered her mouth. Dad whispered, "Harper." I tapped the signature line with my fingertip. "This gift, this entire house, isn't a pre-death asset. It's a completed transfer. Fully registered. Irrevocable. No liens. No pending probate. No shared beneficiaries." Travis swallowed. My sister glared, voice trembling. "You can't just decide that." "I already did. Months ago." Mom started crying again, this time not fear, this time relief. Dad sank into the nearest chair like his body finally understood rest. And then I slid a new envelope onto the table. Gold seal. Thick paper, not cheap at all. This, I said, is a notice. Travis frowned. A notice for what? I held eye contact. For trespassing. Silence detonated. My sister's face drained. You wouldn't. I stepped 1 inch closer, not yelling, just truth. I already filed it this morning with the sheriff's office. Travis's jaw literally snapped shut. His hands shook. And the part that shook them the most? I wasn't angry. I was calm. Weapon-grade calm. I turned toward the door. Because the sheriff would be arriving in exactly 6 minutes. Dad whispered, Harper, they'll actually come here? I nodded. They're already en route. Travis staggered back, like I'd punched him in the lungs. My sister slammed her palm on the marble counter, desperation finally breaking through the entitlement. You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? Where are we supposed to stay? I tilted my head. That sounds like a you problem, not a mom and dad problem. Mom looked at me with watery eyes, but there was something new in them. Not fear, pride. Dad stood, slowly, like a man whose chains were finally loosening after 30+ years. My sister pointed at my parents, voice shaking. They said we could live here. Dad finally spoke, voice steady. We were scared to say no to you. But this house was never yours. My sister froze. Not because she didn't know that deep down, but because her greatest weapon just left her, compliance. Travis tried one last pathetic tactic. You think the law will take your side just because you have money? I didn't smile. I don't need money for this. I have documentation, your voices, your texts, your threats recorded. His eyes widened. And there, I continued quietly, is the difference between confidence and delusion. Right on cue, the front gate alarm chimed. Mom inhaled sharply. Dad placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steady, protective again. Law enforcement never knocks hysterically. It's a calm knock. Authority doesn't need volume. 3 firm taps. I stepped toward the door. Travis's voice cracked behind me. Harper, wait, we can talk. I turned the knob, opened the door, and said calmly to the deputy, they're the unauthorized parties. The deputy nodded, hand on his utility belt. Understood, ma'am. The shift in the room was instant. Travis's bravado evaporated like steam on cold glass. My sister reached for him like a drowning passenger grabbing any surface that might float. The deputy stepped inside. Names, please. My sister's voice trembled so badly the vowels shook when she spoke. Travis couldn't look up at all, his chin practically glued to his chest, humiliation heavy as concrete. Mom wiped her tears, straightened her spine. Dad placed his hand over the deed like a soldier reclaiming his own flag. I didn't say a word. Not to scream. Not to justify. Not to ask for anything. Because this wasn't revenge at all. It was simply balance. The deputy read through the paperwork I'd filed that morning. A perfectly organized stack of proof of ownership, transfer confirmation, my parents' affidavit, the notice of unlawful entry. Paper beats arrogance. Every time. My sister's voice cracked. You're doing this to your own family? Dad answered before I could open my mouth.
No.
You did this to yourself. The deputy nodded once. Firm. You too need to gather your belongings. Now. Travis tried one last pathetic line. Barely audible. Harper, we didn't think you'd actually go this far. I finally looked him in the eye. You never thought I'd stop funding your delusion. My sister covered her face as the deputy guided them toward the hallway to pack. Mom slid into the armchair like her bones finally belonged somewhere safe. Dad looked at me, but this time, not like a daughter he hoped would shrink to keep peace alive. He looked at me like a daughter who finally ended a curse. The curse of always being the one who paid. The deputy walked them down the hall, and the sound of drawers slamming open, frantic, uneven, traveled back like background noise in someone else's nightmare, not mine. Mom held the teacup again, but her hands weren't shaking anymore. Dad exhaled, not a sigh of defeat, but a release. A man who finally wasn't bracing for the next humiliation. He looked at me with a strange mix of disbelief and something I never thought I'd see from him. Respect. Harper, he whispered, voice raw. You didn't just buy a house today. You saved us. And that sentence, that tiny 10-word sentence, was more than any award I ever earned. Because he finally understood. He finally saw the years he ignored, when I was building, earning, sacrificing, while my sister lived like a princess off borrowed illusion. From the hall came the sound of my sister's panicked voice. What do I pack first? And Travis, defeated. Just grab anything, we're out of time. Mom slowly reached toward me. Not to cling, not to beg, but to touch my sleeve, like she was checking if the moment was real. Will we get to stay? She whispered. You're home, I said softly. This is yours, no one gets to steal that again. Her eyes filled, but not with fear, with relief, with finally being safe in her own walls. Outside, the deputy cleared his throat. They're ready to leave, ma'am. I nodded, walked to the front door, and stood beside it. As they passed, my sister didn't look at me. She couldn't. Travis glanced up once, eyes hollow, like a gambler who finally understood the casino was never built for him to win.
They stepped out onto the driveway.
The gate closed behind them with a metallic click, not loud but final. The deputy walked them to their SUV, waited until doors slammed shut, then gave me a small, respectful nod before heading back to his cruiser. The patrol lights faded off the estate road, leaving only silence and the soft hum of the fountain in the front garden. Mom and Dad stood in the foyer just staring, like their bodies were present but their minds were still catching up to the idea that safety was suddenly real. Dad sat slowly, almost carefully, like he was sitting in a seat that finally belonged to him. Mom wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. Not sobbing anymore, just processing. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. I shook my head. This wasn't a gift. This was correction. They both looked up. All my life, I continued softly, you thought peace came from tolerating them. But peace comes from boundaries, not endurance. Dad breathed out, like someone who'd been underwater for years and finally surfaced. Mom exhaled a short, shaky laugh, a laugh of relief, not irony. I didn't think you'd come today, she admitted. I looked around the foyer, the marble my parents deserved, the quiet dignity they'd earned, and then back at her. I came because you finally needed me for the right reason, not to sacrifice myself again, but to restore you. She nodded, tears returning, but the clean kind, not the scared kind. I stepped closer, placed my hand gently on hers, steady, warm. You get to rest now, I told them softly. This home is yours, and no one gets to touch that. Dad whispered. So what happens next? I smiled, calm. We reclaim your life now, not theirs. The following morning, sunlight poured into the breakfast room like something had been scrubbed clean, not the walls, but the air itself. Mom made pancakes. Dad read the paper. Not rushed, not tense, not watching the door like intruders lived inside their shadows. I sat at the kitchen island sipping coffee, my own chipped ceramic mug, the one with a tiny corner missing near the rim that always scratches the edge of my lip if I forget to tilt it just right. That stupid little imperfection always reminds me I'm human, not a machine built to fix everyone else. Mom looked up suddenly and smiled, a real smile. No fear hiding behind it. Dad asked if I wanted to hang a family photo in the living room. Not a forced one, not a staged one, a real one. One we would take today. That's when my phone buzzed. 100 missed messages on the family group thread they created overnight. My sister. We need to talk. Where do you expect us to live? And then, we deserve a second chance. I stared at the screen for a long moment, not angry, not triumphant, just done. I typed one sentence and hit send. Start over from who you are, not who you take from. Then, I muted the thread forever. We locked the front door, not as fear, but as closure, and walked out to the garden to pick a spot for the new family photo. No tension. No competition. No begging for validation. Just 3 people who finally understood that love isn't measured by how much someone tolerates your disrespect, but by how much someone refuses to let you destroy them. Mom took my hand.
Dad stood a little taller.
Their home, truly theirs, at last.